What is post-secondary transition? Consider the question, what do you want for your child after they leave school? This will include research, using resources, and setting goals. It's a lot of information and there's a lot to consider, and trying to do it all at once can really feel consuming. It will be a unique experience, but there are other families who are going through this at the same time you are. So we're here having conversations that will ask parents to think long term.
So, welcome. This is a post secondary transition podcast. We have conversations around the process for families of students with disabilities. I'm one of the hosts. My name is Patrick Cadigan. I am a public school education teacher, special education teacher, who is my co host.
I am Megan Smallwood, and I am a public school transition coordinator.
All right, Megan. So, here we are. We are in what? Season 2. We made it.
Yeah, crazy. How did we get here so fast?
Yeah, one year in. Obviously, we've been having a lot of conversations behind the scenes about how we want to move forward, how we want this podcast to look, and what we would like to do with it. I think where we're going to start is obviously why we're here. What is it that we're doing? What motivates us?
Right.
So, Megan, we did it. I did it to you when we first started this whole thing. I threw you under the bus first. So I'm gonna put it to you again the first time. Why is it that you do what you do?
It goes way back. I mean, it's been ingrained in me since I was little because I have a sister with cognitive disability. So I've lived special ed my whole life. I witnessed the transition from the public school setting to after 21 and saw all the stress that my parents went through. So that kind of drove me, to get into special ed. And then as I went through, those first few years as a classroom teacher, realized more and more that the end goal for parents was really what my focus was, my motivation to help people, just preparing for life after. So I went through years as a classroom teacher and decided that the transition coordinator role was the role that I really wanted. And here I am, 7 years in.
So how long did it take you to get to the transition coordinator role?
I was 12 years in the classroom.
Oh, okay.
And then, and every year, it was about year 5 or year 6 while I was getting my master's that I took a course specifically, discussing that post-secondary transition world and all of the different agencies and all those fun acronyms that we help parents figure out. And so I started nagging our transition coordinator lead of the county and just checked in every year to see when there'd be an opening.
And I remember revolving around the master class. That's how you and I hooked up in terms of
Right.
I had that the Towson class, and we did I needed an interview with a transition coordinator, and I happened to, because if I remember correctly, I was leaving the school that we were at Cedar Lane.
Yeah, I think we had a year or
Did
two
did we
together.
have a?
Yep.
I think it was just a year. I
Yeah.
think it was just a year. So luckily, I had kind of remembered you, and so when that class came up years later, because let me think, I would have been, that would have been like 3 or 4 years later after I had left,
Right.
and in my third year in the master's class. So
Yeah.
and we did that interview, and then I'll never forget it. You were like, "Oh yeah, I've been thinking about something like this, interview style and talking to parents and providers." And I was like, wow, guess what? We could do a podcast.
Yeah, and in terms of the website too, it's there's so much information, and I feel for the parents. I've been in their shoes in one, some kind of format with my sister, but there's just so much to know and so much to keep track of, and it was just so important to me to have a place for them to access that continuously, when they had the time to look through it and go back and refer to it and just know that they weren't alone in it all.
And that was one of the other things that was kind of unique, is that I remember when we first started talking, you had included the link. So a little bit of background for our listeners who wouldn't know. The original iteration of that site would have been done with Google. Google has a program that allows you to build websites. So Megan had included that in her signature, and I clicked on that link and I looked at it and I was like, huh. I was like, yeah, this is really interesting. I think more could be done. And I'll never, again, one of those things I'll never forget. I sent you an email. Now, most people, you get an email from somebody that you barely know, and you're like, hey, can I work on this? And you were just like, yeah, fine, go for it.
Yeah,
And
it was funny because I have to credit my principal from our school that we worked at together. I had been talking to him and I'm like, I just need to figure out where I can house information for these parents. He's like, well, what about a Google site? So that's where it started. And I'm not the tech savvy one. So I was very proud of myself for what I put together. And then yeah, you came along. You're like, can I have your login? Can I just, work on this for you? And I was like, hey, you can't make it any worse than I already have. So sure, go ahead.
yeah, and then we did, let me think, we worked on that together for probably like a year or two. And then
Yeah.
I will say that in terms of design and ease of use and things, we definitely hit a roadblock.
Yeah.
And so we, um, I think it was one of those things where, and I've learned not to do this, but I just was like, oh, hey, I can go and we'll do it over here. So we jumped platforms and we went over to Weebly, and and then I think I sent you an email after the fact and was like, oh, hey, here's a new website and here's a
Yeah.
domain, and
Don't use this link anymore. Use this one. And I was
yeah,
like, okay.
I've changed my mind. And luckily, you were okay with it. But that even in that iteration itself has seen a lot of changes as we have continued to do this. Because let me think. Obviously, for our regular listeners, in the last episode, because we got caught, one of us was not even in the country, and one of us was in a totally different state. We had to throw something together really quickly, and so I threw together a collection of the website pages that we had recently updated. So, like starting with the certificate track page. So, for those uninitiated, when you go to www.postsecondarytransition.com, you're met with like a menu system across the top, right? And so you have start here and certificate track and diploma track and things like that. But under the certificate track, to start with there, we went in and we started to. One of the things that has always been really tricky about design is to make it easy and to make it understandable and to make it consistent. And that was the one thing that, like, just around the post-secondary transition process itself, like, there's so much information out there and it's so widely available, but it's like a storm.
Well, and that was the one thing I always struggled with, like how to format it or present it the easiest way possible to families. And I'm always looking for feedback. And I know you and I are always appreciative of feedback about
Yeah.
the website, but it's just so hard because it's not black and white. It's so gray. And, you want to put something under certificate, but that could be applicable to a student who is earning a diploma or like a
Yes.
tweener. So it's just good. I mean, if you get on the website to check out all the areas, you just never know what you might come across.
Yeah, speaking of that, because I remember in one of the original iterations, so there's under the certificate track, there's a tab where it can go take you to our information page about DDA. Well, at one point, we also had doors on there. But then, in our discussions and in, looking for more information and, like you said, trying to make it easier to navigate, it was like, well, this really belongs under the diploma
Right.
side. Yes, it is applicable to students who are not graduating with a diploma, but for the most part. So we kind of, move things around. And I feel like we're doing that constantly.
Yeah.
Hopefully it's not driving anybody too crazy, but definitely on that page, we did updated links, updated visuals to just try to make it easier to understand. And along those lines, we also did the same thing with our adult agencies page. And one of the things that I threw this out in the last episode, and I want to throw it out again, this is not intended to be the like be all and end all, which is to say that we had highlighted, Megan had put together an information sheet that she was giving out to parents. So I used that as the template, and then I built kind of the page around it. But of course, this was only certain agencies. This wasn't all of them. And I remember, because when you did that information sheet, one of the things that you were very quick to say, and I think you did it like in right at the bottom, you were like, look, I'm not endorsing anyone.
Right.
This is just for informational purposes.
Yeah, exactly. I figure it's just helpful because you look at a list of agencies and you're like, well, I don't know where to start. I don't know what each one offers. So just from my personal experience with families, I figured this would be helpful to at least rule out or, highlight some of the ones that could be a possibility. So,
Well, and then one of the cool things is, one of the updates that we did is that we did find on, and if I remember correctly, I want to say it's on the DDA page, but there was a page that they had provided that did have the full list.
Yeah.
Now, again, this is specifically for the state of Maryland, but it had the full list of agencies, and I don't remember how we found that, but I was like, yeah, we could probably make this easier to get to. So
I believe that might have come from one of the coordinator of community services agencies, because I was looking for families that I've been working with that live in Anne Arundel County as well. So I started looking at their list just to kind of get an idea, since I'm familiar with our county. But I think it's just good for all families. You just never know again, you're thinking long-term goals after 21. What if you want to retire down at the beach? What if you want to move into Western Maryland? You have to consider options outside of this county if you plan on, moving. So it's just good to have that information.
And it's, playing off of that, and you and I have had this conversation before, like in terms of trying to figure out how to make this information more like broad or broadly available. But, again, it's been tricky. I'm not going to lie. It has been tricky. And I feel like we have predominantly focused in Maryland because, of course, that's where we live. That's where we work, right? Like, that's what we know and understand. But in context, recently, my wife and I, we went down to Florida. We were staying with friends. And while I was there, I did a Google search for post-secondary transition. And I did it for two reasons. One, because I wanted to find out where we were on the Google rankings, but then also to see, because, of course, Google lets you by location. Then when you do a search, it'll give you relevant links. And so one of the things that I thought was really interesting about Florida was that it seemed, so whereas where we live, and Megan is a testament to this, our county supports transition coordinators specifically as a role, as a job. And the impression that I got from Florida is that they were relying entirely on websites and pushing that information out to parents in that way. And I mean, that's certainly a way to do it. I'm not saying that it's wrong. I just was like, oh, okay, this is interesting. So there was a plethora of resources that were that they had, that were available in Florida, and it was really interesting, like parsing through all those and reading them and seeing what they had to say.
Yeah, and I think it goes back to, in Maryland, and every county handles it differently. Like at our county, it's specific. I have a couple schools. We have coordinators assigned to the schools. But I know in other counties, you might have a coordinator who's assigned to half the county. So you're relying more on that special educator or case manager, or in building people that you have built a relationship with them. So regardless of the fact that we live in Maryland, I think, thinking outside to any other state, it's just, it does ultimately fall on the parent. And I know in one of our parent panels, a parent has said many times that he is the constant for his child. I have all these people to help me, but I am the constant. At 21, when they go away, I'm still going to be there. So I cannot solely rely on these people to do it for me and to say, here, just look at this one. You need to do the research. You need to look at all the resources. And that's why I think it's so important, at least for me, to make sure it's all presented, for you within this podcast, within this website. So you have all that information and can make the best decision for you and your family.
And and again, I'm going to throw out there and kind of segue into one of the things that's really interesting about what it is that we're trying to do was, because there is so much information, it's also knowing what to present and when to present. And what I mean by that is that one of the pages that we recently updated was our healthcare transition page. And that actually had Okay, I'll throw out there both the healthcare transition and then the housing information, two separate pages, and two separate sets of informational blocks. But what I found when I was looking through kind of what we were doing, in some cases it didn't fit, right? Like it didn't make any sense why that was there. So I actually started taking stuff down. And so probably more so for the housing, but I really started to focus in just on the key, on those key bits of information, like really focus it, like residential provider, which is something that families, when they're transitioning out of school, that is something that they're going to start thinking about. But then also emergency housing, and there was a whole bunch of other stuff in there, but it was like, yeah, it's a little too much. Maybe one
Yeah.
day, we'll come back and we'll do something like that again. But in terms of healthcare and then the housing, it was almost like we took away, but the information that was left is really valuable. We think that it's gonna be really helpful.
Yeah. And I think that is a rabbit hole that you can kind of fall down.
Yeah. We kind
And
of, that comes up a lot when we're talking transition rabbit holes.
I know. And then it's just, and that'll happen to me, within the school year. I'll talk to a parent and I'll get stuck on a topic and I'll go down the rabbit hole and I'm like, oh, it's 3 o'clock. How did that happen? But there's just so much information out there and you're trying to weed through it to make it easier to present so that, the parent doesn't feel this overwhelming, just, it just, yeah, it's a lot.
It is a lot. And then one of the other things that we did, so we used to have pages up for the post-secondary college programs that were available kind of in and around our area. We had focused in on like Howard Community College, Towson, and then even our friends over in Baltimore County. But what we had decided was, because we had essentially built our own pages that used information that they had thrown out to the public. And don't get me wrong, those pages were beautiful and we were really proud of what they look like. But at the end of the day, we decided, you know what? We just want families to just be able to get straight to the information, go directly to where they need to get to. So we updated those. We updated those to essentially just be links. So we threw out Beacon College, Community College of Baltimore. They have a program called CASE. Which Howard Community College, which I mentioned, Project Access, Montgomery College, the Challenge program. So again, the idea is that if you go to that tab and you click on those links, it's going to take you directly to those programs. And there is a lot of information there. I feel like they did really well with presenting it.
Yeah, and I also think, as, get back into the school year, I feel like there's always more coming out and more to be added. And as you look at the post-secondary options in terms of college, there's just so many around the country. So again, even if you don't live in Maryland, this can help you to start knowing what terms to search for, what kind of programs there are that could be in your area. So there's just a plethora available.
Yeah, and along that plethora, last thing, because I feel like we're really like, pushing the website right now, but it's just such a cool resource. But one thing I did want to throw out there for our guardianship page. So we give kind of a brief overview about guardianship. We're also very quick to talk about that it is not legal advice. It's just an information page.
And there are alternatives to guardianship.
Yes, and there's a link directly in there. So we got guardianship, alternatives to guardianship, and we think that they're both really, really good resources.
Yep.
But one of the things that I wanted to throw out there, we have new information up from those. Clearer information, I think. We went back and we kind of looked at what we had written and we were like, okay, I think we can do more with this. But my favorite one personally was we came up with some updated resource links, and we really put a bunch out there. And so I think it's really going to be helpful. And we did the same thing on the alternatives to guardianship as well. So there are some links. There's a lot of links. So go check them out. It's good stuff.
Yeah. And they're not going anywhere. So you can look at it, get overwhelmed, walk away, come back.
Well, and so along those lines, we recently got an email, didn't we? where
Yeah.
it was an outside agency that was looking to partner with us in terms of sharing of resource links, and so we're looking to kind of
Add
expand a little
more.
bit. Yeah, add
Right.
more, and again, we're working really hard to make sure that it's relevant, that it applies,
It's
and
current.
yeah, and that it's current, and that it's easy to find. But that was a cool email. I wasn't expecting it, and I always like when I get
It's
emails like
nice.
that.
It's nice because we are more than willing to explore more things, and I love when people reach out and they're like, "Hey, we'd love to share our information because that just means word's getting out there, and we want to add more resources for you, the families, to have." So we're
Well,
always happy for them.
and that came up recently because, of course, we also have a Facebook page, and we had shared out recently some information that was shared by Parents Place in Maryland.
Hmm.
And so, you know how Facebook works. You just click the share button, and, it goes up to your page. And I really appreciated the fact that they responded and said thanks.
Yeah.
Thank you for sharing. Because we get that too with when we interviewed
Barrier free.
Barrier Free, and
Yeah.
both Lauren and Britt. Every time we post something, they always kind of come back around and say thank you. So
Yeah, they're wonderful.
yeah, they are super cool people. I really enjoyed that conversation. If you hadn't had a chance to listen to it, so effectively, we kind of have two websites, don't we? We
Yeah.
have www.postsecondarytransition.com, which is the informational page. But then for this specific podcast, we have a secondary site, www.p2transition.com. And that you can go to and you can find all of the conversations that we have had up until this point. And you figure after 1 year, we've done well.
Yeah, I was looking at the list this morning and I was like, holy moly, we recorded that many? Didn't feel like it.
Well, and I think that for people so this is for my podcasters audience out there, that one of the things that I've been most proud that we have been able to do is to be consistent. Since we started last year, come hell or high water, we have posted one episode every 2 weeks. And one of the things that Megan and I had been talking about behind the scenes was that we are the only podcast that talks about the post-secondary transition process. I can say that unequivocally. I've done the research. I've looked into it. Now, there have been podcasts in the past, but they usually don't last. I think, and I'm going to include a link to one in the show notes, which I found the information was helpful, but it was just a series of discussions, and then it just stopped. And then there was no more. And when I listened to that very last episode, I mean, you could tell that the intent was to keep going, but then they just never did. And don't get me wrong, that's no judgment on the people who were throwing out the podcast. None at all. We've been at it for 1 year, and we've been pretty consistent. So I think we're doing really well.
Go
So what do we got? Yeah, rah, rah. All right. So what do you think? What do we got coming up? What do we as we move into season 2? What are some of the things that we've been talking about? Let's throw it out there so that we can give everyone something to look forward to.
Well, I think we definitely want to go back to our families and get families who have gone through the process or going through the process to share their experience. That's always a good one. I think just hearing that firsthand experience is so helpful. But I think we've also, over the year, met a lot of cool people, and we've gotten a lot of contacts that we need to reach out to and set up. And that's for different agencies and different resources for after 21. The having the variety is helpful.
Yeah,
So a
yeah.
little bit of everything, so you know all the options. But
I think my one favorite story about that is that we had actually Megan did a what was it, like an informational session with the people from Think College. And so I reached out and I said, hey, this is something that we're doing. This podcast is something we're doing. Would you guys like to come on and talk about it? And they responded and they were very enthusiastic. And I was like, oh, that's great. So I crafted this very well written email and included dates and was very proud of myself. I was very professional. And then turned off my computer and, went away, and didn't
Best
hear,
intentions.
yeah, didn't hear back from the Think College people. And, you get busy and I kind of forgot about it. And then one day I was like, hey, I never heard back from the Think College people. I wonder why that is. And when I went in, and then sure enough, there was that email sitting in the drafts folder because I never actually bothered to send it. So,
Whoops.
yeah, good work, Patrick. That's way to do it there, buddy. So we're gonna reach back out to them and hope. I'm looking forward to that because when Miss Maria responded, some of the things that she was talking about, I was just like, oh yeah, this is gonna.
And it's funny because when we had our session back in the spring, and they were sharing about their opportunities, and another transition teacher and I were sitting there, we're like, we need to take a road trip up to, the Northeast to visit these places because it was just amazing. And of course, your mind starts going and brainstorming, how can we replicate that down here? Like, there's just so many opportunities. It's just amazing. It's nice to see what else is out there past our little bubble sometimes.
Yes, I agree. Oh, and then actually, so speaking of bubbles, one of the other ones that I'm looking forward to was we recently got someone from another podcast reached out to us and wants us to come on and talk about. Now, this is really cool.
Yeah,
because,
I'm excited for this.
Yeah, this one is going to be really cool. For those of you who have been paying attention, we did one of our helpful resources about this, the T21 Mom podcast, and Miss Mary, who she has a daughter who has Down syndrome, and so, but she is over on the West Coast, and not only the West Coast, but the Canadian West Coast. She reached out to us and she said, I'd really like you guys to come on and talk about the transition process. And Megan and I were just like, oh yeah, this is because it's just such a different. It's everything about it is different, like different coast, different country. So we're really looking forward to that one. I know that we're going back and forth. We're trying to find out some dates that we're going to work. But I even reached out to one of my families that I have stayed in contact with one of my students, and I talked to Mom about that, and I said, this is what we're doing, and are you going to be okay if I talk about Lucas, who was my student? She was like, sure. So I was like, all right, cool. I don't know to what extent, how the conversation is going to be framed or anything, but I definitely that is like in my own personal experience. Like I thought that made a lot of sense.
Yeah.
What else? Do we have anything else coming up? I mean, like you said, we obviously we want to reach back out to our families.
Yeah, I feel like as we get going and as we get back into the mindset of the school year, it's just gonna all come together again.
Yeah, of course, because as we speak, it is a Wednesday, and you and I are going back to school on Thursday.
Tomorrow, yes.
Yeah, well, it's been a good summer.
Been a good run.
Yeah, I think I'm ready. Is there anything else you want to talk about while we're?
No, I don't think so. I think it's just always, I know it's hard to say, and I always say this with a little laugh when I talk to families. I'm like, in your free time, but it's just, don't wait until the last minute. Just always, always, always be checking those resources. Check our website, check our podcast, check with people at school. Just always have transition in the back of your mind, because so many times I hear families say, oh my God, it's the last year. I haven't done anything. Like, just trying to put it off and enjoy the bubble, that's been for the last 21 years that their child's been in the school system. Just always be prepared. And that's what we're here to help with. It doesn't matter if your child's not even 14 yet and you're listening. It's some of the stuff will change. Yes. Resources may be updated and whatnot, but the process in general, that holds pretty steady. So there's things that you're going to want to just begin to brush up with and talk to those around you that you might know going through it. And it just starts small.
Start small. I think that is a really good place to start. And it's also going to be a really good place for us to stop. But before we let you go, this is what we're going to effectively do as a call to action, right? So as we move into our second year, what we are interested in doing is building the audience. Right. But we need your help in order to be able to do it. So please follow the information from this and other conversations in our show notes. like, follow, and definitely share out the podcast, both the post-secondary transition website itself and our podcast website, p2transition.com. We have a YouTube channel. We have videos of all the conversations. So we record it. Obviously, it's designed and intended to be audio, but I have some handy dandy software that also turns it into a video. And so we have that posted to our YouTube channel, but we didn't stop there, right? In a lot of ways, we did a lot of the legwork. We curated videos on the topics that we've already talked about that revolve around transition. We've created playlists that cover guardianship, alternatives to guardianship. We have some videos up there about ABLE accounts, and there's going to be more to come because, one of the other things that was tricky about that is we wanted to make sure that the information was updated, current, relevant. So sometimes we have videos that are posted, but then we take them down, and if we can, we're going to replace them with new and updated information. But it is there, and it is at our YouTube channel, so definitely be sure to subscribe there as well. Check it out. And then we've said it, and we're going to say it again. Check out the website, chock full of information around the entire transition process. You're also going to find both our contact information there and we've actually been doing blogging. So you'll find we've been talking about some of the things around the transition process, and that is on our blog. So you will find it all at the www.postsecondarytransition.com. Oh, that was a lot.
That was a lot.
But episode 1 of season 2, and I think we nailed it.
Yahoo.
All right. Well, then that's it. Thank you guys for joining us, and we're going to have more conversations coming up. So we will see you soon.
Thank you.